So welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on when you are, where you are. We are very happy to welcome guests from all over the United States today, the West Coast, Utah, East Coast, and also attendees from France. I'm Ludivine Wolczyk. I'm the Executive Director of the French-American Chamber of Commerce in Boston. We are a nonprofit organization with close to 400 members in New England. And our mission is to animate the French-American business community in our area. We are also part of a national chamber with more than 6,000 members all over the United States. And we are happy to connect you if you need introductions to businesses in all the United States. So today is our first webinar of the year with our longtime member, Cara Lund. Thank you, Cara, for animating this session today. Cara has been a member for many years. She has worked extensively throughout the United States, France, and Shanghai. She has clients from over 20 different countries. And she has a very interesting profile, and she's a wonderful performance coach. When Cara contacted me a few weeks ago to prepare this webinar, first I was very interested in the subject. I was not I did not know much about mental fitness, and she convinced me that this is a topic that is going to be of interest for our community. But I'm not going to be longer. Cara, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And first off, I'm sharing through Google Slides because I had trouble with PowerPoint, so forgive me for that. But bonjour et bonsoir à tous. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here, and thank you so much, Ludivine and Jason, for organizing this meeting. Many of you know me from the community as a presentation skills coach and a voice and speech coach, but I wanted to give you some insight on what I've been doing pre-pandemic or since the pandemic started. And I seem to be collecting coaching certifications, which has been a wonderful thing. I was helping people to get out of their own way before, and now I'm just a little better at it and am getting credentials along the way. So I wanted to bring this material to you because this is what I'm really most excited about, is the positive intelligence program and coaching work that I have been doing, because I really believe in it. I firmly believe in it. And I think that it is an absolute game changer in terms of personal and professional development. So you are the first community that I'm sharing this with. So you get to be my mental fitness coaches, and I get to practice my mental fitness skills on you. So thank you so much for that opportunity. Okay, so our topic is mental fitness and how to grow the 3 core mental muscles needed to move from survive to thrive. First, a definition of what mental fitness means. Mental fitness is your capacity to handle life's challenges with more positive rather than a negative mindset, with a positive mindset rather than being stressed and being upset about things the way you normally would. And its impact has an enormous impact on peak performance, peace of mind and wellness, preventing burnout, as well as healthy professional and personal relationships. Now, with this definition on the capacity to handle life's challenges with a more positive rather than negative mindset, I want to tell you that I was born and raised in New England. And we have a tendency to sprinkle cynicism and skepticism on our cereal for breakfast, and sometimes on our lunch too. And having visited Europe, I know that that can be the case in certain countries in Europe as well. So I just want you to know that this isn't some Southern California fad that is hyped up on too much vitamin D and built on forced positivity. It's something that really has legs and that I believe in. And if it was any of those things, that I would go running and screaming from it. But it isn't. It's really had an enormous impact on my life. So imagine that you are used to handling maybe the small and the medium-sized hills every day in terms of challenges. And then you're met with a mountain. and you don't quite have the skills to meet that mountain. You could wait for the mountain to move, and you might be waiting for the rest of your life, and then you have to figure out how to work with that challenge in your way. Or you could blame the mountain for being a mountain, but that doesn't really make much sense either. We can't blame the mountain for being a mountain. So instead, we would have to figure out, well, how do I navigate this? How do I figure out what skills that I need to what my skills gap is, and how do I build the muscles to be able to scale and navigate this mountain and get to the other side, but do it with more curiosity and enjoyment in the process, without judging myself for it, but figure out what it is that I need to do and build those muscles to get to the other side of the mountain, knowing that on the other side of that mountain, and you will get there, that everything will seem easier. So I just want to give you an image of what's possible here and how this can impact you in a more positive way. So a little bit of background and research. The Positive Intelligence Program is the creation of Shirzad Shamin out of Stanford University, and he has built this program on this wonderful synthesis of 4 major areas of science: cognitive, behavioral, and positive psychology, neuroscience, and performance science. So it is the synthesis of those areas plus some original research. And the original research is devised from hundreds of CEOs and their executive teams, Stanford students, world-class athletes, and over 50,000 participants from 50 countries. That being said, it has intercultural relevance, and it's not just something that works in the United States. A key part of their original research is from factor analysis, which is basically looking at the core elements or the root elements of whatever it is that you are studying. And so a simple example of this is at the base of thousands of colors that we experience every day are 3 factors: red, blue, and yellow. So it's red, blue, and yellow that are a part of creating the thousands of colors that we experience every day. So what they found through their research is, through factor analysis, is at the root of mental fitness are only 3 core muscles that we have to build if we want to develop our mental fitness. And those 3 core muscles are the saboteur interceptor muscle, the sage muscle, and the self-command muscle. So let me give you a little bit of context around these 3 muscles. You are probably familiar with the Star Wars series. It is the classic tale of the hero's journey. And we love these stories that are built around the struggle between good and evil, dark and light, our inner Darth Vader and Jedi warriors, because it's a reflection of what's going on inside of us every day, in small ways or in large ways. It's about our inner struggle. So we could probably say that our inner Jedi has a very high level of mental fitness in order to defeat our inner Darth Vader. So besides identifying the 3 core muscles needed to build mental fitness, the results of factor analysis found that there are 10 ways that we sabotage ourselves every day. There are 10 agents of sabotage, and 1 sage, 1 Jedi warrior. So for our purposes, we're going to refer to our inner Darth Vader as those 10 saboteurs and refer to our Jedi Knight as our sage. So let's get to know those characters just a little bit more. 10 saboteurs that motivate us through negative emotions like fear, stress, anger, guilt, shame, disappointment. They are associated with parts of the sympathetic nervous system and the limbic system and parts of the left brain. They are the fight, flight, or freeze response, and they are reactive in nature. And they also help us to, they're the road that leads us to burnout. They generate success, but not necessarily happiness. And we know this because of many of the billionaires and millionaires that at the end of their life, they've amassed so much wealth and have accomplished so many things, but they aren't left with a sense of real fulfillment or peace in their heart or calm and contentment. So it might help us get things done being pushed through stress, but it doesn't necessarily make us happier along the way. The sage, on the other hand, has 5 powers, one sage with 5 powers, and the sage motivates us through positive emotions like empathy, curiosity, creativity, purpose, and calm, clear-headed action. The sage is found in the parasympathetic nervous system, or parts of the right brain, and the mid-prefrontal cortex, and that is associated with the rest and digest response. And the sage is proactive as opposed to reactive, and leads to behaviors that foster not only success but also happiness. So they generate your highest success and happiness. So from the 3 core muscles, in order to understand what the saboteur interceptor muscle is, which is the first muscle we have to develop, we first need to understand a little bit more about the saboteurs and what exactly we are intercepting. So the first of the saboteurs is the judge. And even though we might not have all of the other saboteurs, everybody has the judge. The judge is the master saboteur, and the judge dictates what the other saboteurs are doing. But the judge works in 3 basic modalities. The judge is the one that wakes us up at 2 o'clock in the morning and berates us for past imperfections or future failures. It wakes you up and says, "You're such an idiot. Why did you say that stupid thing? Or why did you make that stupid mistake? What did you think that you were doing?" Or wakes us up and says, "I don't think you're going to make that tomorrow. I think you're going to lose. So you might as well just stay home. Who do you think that you are to think you're going to make that and make it right?" The second mode of the judge is the one that judges other people. It's constantly finding something wrong with other people rather than what's right. They are too tall or too short, or they're too stupid, or they didn't go to the right school, or they don't speak the right language or speak it well enough, or they don't even know anything about wine, or my God, they've descended from the Huguenots. Whatever. We are constantly finding something wrong with other people rather than what's right. So we know these first 2 modalities as the inner critic or inner gremlins, things like that. But what we don't usually spend time on is the third modality, which plays out in small ways all the time. And that third modality is the voice that is constantly finding something wrong in situations and circumstances. And that's the voice that says that, yeah, you can't be happy until, nope, not until you do this, not until you get out of that job, not when you get into this job, you'll be happy. Nope, not until this happens. And keeps moving the goalpost down the road, all to the way to our grave if we let it, pulling us by the nose. So the judge not only keeps us on hold to feel content and to feel happy and to feel like we can impact the world in a much more positive way, but is constantly finding something wrong with those situations and circumstances so that we are in this constant upset and holding pattern. But instead of waiting, your sage would look this over and not wait, but would learn to enjoy the process along the way. And that's the difference. So a lot of our unhappiness and stress comes from the judge coming in and strangling the process of creation and problem solving by saying, this is bad, this is really bad, and putting us in this negative spin. So besides the judge, there are 9 other accomplice saboteurs, some of whom are stronger in me, but might be stronger in others are stronger in you. And it's just helpful to take a look at them and see what they're all about. If you've worked with me before in managing nerves, this will probably look familiar to you. And they are the avoider, hyperachiever, controller, pleaser, hypervigilant, hyperrational, restless, stickler, and victim. And I'm sure that you recognize some of these in yourself and probably people around you. The interesting thing about these characters is that many of them are a natural extension of our strengths. For instance, if you have a really relaxed, easygoing, go-with-the-flow personality, that strength taken too far can be the avoider. someone who's avoiding uncomfortable situations. If you are an achiever, a high achiever, that's a wonderful thing to be, that's a strength. But when achievement and your sense of your self-worth is dependent on achievement and status, that crosses the line into hyperachiever, and now that strength has been turned into something negative that works against you and then pulls everyone else into a little bit of a negative vortex and has an impact on teams and the ecosystem in general. If your natural strength is, if you are a born leader and your strength is to be an activator and motivator of people, that strength taken too far can become a controller. So how does the person who's a natural born leader stay behind the line in their strengths when they feel like they've crossed the line into their controller? It's a wonderful thing to have a purely logical and rational mind. Those people can dig very deeply into complex concepts and stay there for a long time, and they're the inventors of the world. But you don't want to bring a rational mind into any kind of personality conflict where really empathy is needed. So when the rational mind wants to solve personality conflicts or conflict management of any kind and goes into the hyper-rational space, you're not going to hit your goal or your target there. So the rational person needs to really watch out for that. And besides these characters being an extension of our natural strengths, many of them can be developed as children through as survival skills. So for instance, the pleaser and the hyperachiever, as you can imagine, might be something that's developed if love or attention are conditional. Certainly you can understand that the hyper-rational mind can be developed if there's the scene is emotionally chaotic, because moving into a rational or a hyper-rational space is a very safe space to be without the messiness of emotions. So at this point, it's really easy to say, oh, that's my sister. That's my colleague. That's my boss. But it'd be more helpful if we start with ourselves by asking, how do you go negative? What are your tendencies, and where do you cross the line into a negative accomplice saboteur, knowing that there's no shame in it because we all have them. It's just that when we're able to understand where we might get off balance and where this might be sabotaging our job performance or our relationships and happiness, influencing our decision-making and conversations and outlook, it's just good to know where we have a tendency to go and reflect on it. So we want to get to know this cast of characters and how they play out in our head so that we can intercept them, stop, and make another choice. So if you like, you can go to positiveintelligence.com/saboteurs and take a very quick and easy free assessment. I get nothing from sending you there to do that. This happens to be the assessment of a client of mine. So you can see that she has a very high restless and hyperachiever and pleaser saboteur. And what we would do is at the end of 8 weeks of working together on her top 2 or 3, including the judge, because you really only need to focus on your top 2 or 3. Once you do that, it has a tendency to weaken all of the others. But we'd have her take that assessment again and see some of those numbers come down. But the bottom line is that we don't want our personal limitations impacting our professional decision-making, because you can imagine how the systemic implications that this would have. For instance, if a company experiences a drop in sales, then it's very common for leadership to implement control mechanisms and then keep implementing control mechanisms and continue down that path. And who knows, maybe that is the right decision for that particular circumstance. But how will you know? How will you know if that is the right decision and if that is your saboteur and your controller talking, or whether that is your sage talking, and whether that is the best and healthiest outcome for the long term? So we'd want you to go into a position where you you feel the negativity and the grip, the hook in the body of the controller and the judge that says, this is bad, strangling the process of problem solving. And we would want you to consider, okay, let's move into our sage and let's see if we can create our way around out of this process and ask ourselves, what do we need to do that in 3 years from now, we can look back and say that this is the best thing that have ever happened to us? How do we create our way out of this and into that place, into that very statement? So get to know yourself at a deeper level and understand how those things impact you. When you feel like you're in the grip of negative emotions and that hook, that's exactly where you want to intercept that signal and then see if you can practice stepping away from that automatic judgment and into a place of creativity, which is a much better laser-focused, Jedi warrior-like place to solve problems for the long term. So we want to not just win the battle, we want to win the war. When you do that assessment, you will get a very detailed description of each saboteur, so you have a better idea of the lies that they're telling you and what to watch out for. It's a detailed description and giving you their characteristics, the thoughts and the feelings associated with each saboteur, justification lies, and the implication on you and the people around you. So as I said before, we want to make sure that our personal limitations are not impacting our professional decision-making, relationships, or well-being, so that it's not just starting with us, but that the positive, the place where we might have gone negative and its systemic implications turns into more of a positive vortex, which is a much better place to solve problems creatively. And we spread that positive vortex. So systemic implications that begin with understanding these saboteurs. Okay, so at this point, people say, oh, come on, really? I mean, I work better under pressure. I've always worked better under pressure. My stress has always given me a performance edge. And I wouldn't get anything done, and my team wouldn't get anything done without the stress pushing me. So are you really telling me that negative emotions, that stress that has pushed me to get things done, and that pressure that helps me to all of a sudden get things done and create things, that isn't good for you? So I'm going to ask you another question. Is pain good for you? Is pain good for you? And the answer is yes. If you put your hand on a hot stove, you're going to feel the pain. It might take you a second to feel the pain before you get the signal to take your hand off the hot stove so that you don't burn yourself. And negative emotions work the same way. Negative emotions are there as an alert signal to wake us up to something that needs our attention. But once we've heard the signal, once we've gotten that signal, then their usefulness has expired. So the value of negative emotions is really like acting like pain. It's just an alert. But if you stay in negative emotions, then you go into tunnel vision, and that negativity feeds on itself, pulling others into a kind of negative vortex. And that can lead to a toxic culture. So if you stay in negative emotions at that point, once it's woken you up to say, hey, you know, we're in a pandemic, there's a virus going on, go buy your masks and do what you need to take care of yourself, that's a good thing. But once you stay there, then it's kind of like leaving your hand on the hot stove when it's no longer necessary. So people can see this move from the alert and now let's get out of it as something that's without all the drama and emotions and stress, as being kind of cold or callous or uncaring. It's like, well, she doesn't seem to be upset, so she must not care. And that's actually not the case. We have to unpack that a bit, because the part of your brain that is better equipped at handling the situation is actually the positive part of the brain. So when we are feeling negative emotions, we know that we are in the grip of the saboteur, and we understand that that alert signal is only useful for 1 second. We can't shame ourselves or judge ourselves for not being able to shed those negative emotions after 1 second. But if we just understand that they're only useful at point for that long, then it helps us to maybe navigate into something else. And because the Jedi warrior has a very high level of mental fitness, she can quickly shift into clear, calm, laser-focused action to protect herself and meet the challenge in a much more healthy way for herself and for everybody around her. So this 1 second signal does not apply to grief and serious trauma. That is the exception. Grief is a healthy thing to do. The grieving process is something healthy. But even for people who are grieving or going through something that's serious, comes a point at which they need to say, or they come to an intersection where they would ask themselves, do I want to continue to be victimized by this thing for the rest of my life? Or do I want to make something good out of it? Even there. So many people have, first you need to notice that you're being hijacked and intercept the thought by saying, I don't trust you. You are not my friend. You are not my friend. And you need to move on. You need to get out of here because I have work to do. So thanks for the warning signal. Now go away. And then switch over into positive emotions that are better equipped to help you meet the challenge. So that is how we help to build the saboteur interceptor muscle. Notice, understand, pause, stop, and shift. But once we recognize our saboteurs and intercept them, we can't just step into a complete void. We have to figure out now, where are we going? Once we get out of there, where are we going? And that is the sage muscle. So the sage is like our Jedi Knight who is calm, clear-headed, and fierce and laser-focused in battle against our saboteurs. So the sage isn't something that's very passive and, goes up to a threat and decides to kiss it on the mouth and put themselves at risk. The sage is really laser focused and fierce when needed to protect what's important. It's thinking about the bigger picture and is willing to fight for purpose and values. So the sage lives in regions of the brain associated with positive emotions, peace and calm, clear-headed focus when needed, creativity and big picture thinking, and operates from what we call the sage perspective. And the sage perspective is that every outcome or circumstance can be turned into a gift and opportunity. Every outcome. That's really hard to digest. I know it is, because of all of the real things that are happening. But this isn't forced positivity, again. But our saboteurs and our judge will say, this is silly, this is stupid, this is dangerous, this is naive. This is not the way the world works. But the sage would say, on the other side of your brain, because we're talking about two different brains here, the sage would say, well, actually, this really is how the world works. And the sage is looking again at the big picture. So it might take time to realize the gift and opportunity here in this circumstance, but the sage leaves the window open, saving space for it until it's created or realized. So many people have thanked their illness for giving them a chance to create meaning. Organizations have been founded from loss and tragedy, helping thousands of people as a result. The messiness of life is our teacher and making us stronger and wiser and better able to handle what comes next. So, but only if we can reserve the judgment, only if we can stop the saboteur and the judge from saying, this is bad, and following that path. That's where we step into another place of creativity, where gifts and opportunities are even possible. So I want to tell you a story that demonstrates the wisdom of the sage. It's an old Taoist story. Maybe you've heard it before. And it is the story of the stallion, of an old farmer in China who has a beautiful horse. And he is in love with his stallion, and he decides to enter the stallion in a competition, in a local competition. And the stallion, of course, wins first prize. And his neighbors come to him and say, isn't that wonderful? Your beautiful prized stallion won first prize. You must be so thrilled. And the farmer looks at them and says, Who knows what is good and what is bad? And the neighbors are very confused by this, and they go home and they just shake it off. And then a week later, a group of thieves, knowing that the stallion has won first prize and sees it as more valuable, decides to come and steal the stallion. And the neighbors come back and they say, "Oh my goodness, isn't that horrible? Your prized stallion just got stolen, that you love so much and rely on so much." And the farmer looks at them and says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And the neighbors are thinking, well, okay, what is wrong with this guy? But they decide to shake it off and they go home. The stallion, who misses his home and misses his farmer, decides to break free of his captors, and on his way back to the farm, picks up a bunch of wild mares along the way, befriends wild mares, and he brings them all back to the farm. And the neighbors come back and they say to the farmer, "Isn't that wonderful? Your stallion returned. You got your horse back, plus a whole bunch of other wild mares." And the farmer looks at them and says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And the neighbors are getting a little tired of this, but they go home. And then a little while later, the farmer has a son, and the son is riding one of the wild mares, trying to break it in and tame the wild mare. And he's thrown from the horse and breaks his leg. And the neighbors come to the farmer and say, "Isn't that horrible that your son, who you rely on so much, has just broken his leg?" And the farmer looks at them and says, "Who knows what is good and what is bad?" And the neighbors are truly annoyed by this now. But then a week later, war breaks out, and the army comes through the villages, conscripting all young and eligible sons, all young and eligible males. And of course, when they reach the farmer's house, they can't take the son because he has a broken leg. So the story demonstrates how we attach meaning to things before we even know their importance. And we could say that the farmer kind of acted passively and just sort of let life happen to him. But we'd like to think that it was a matter of choice, and that he really was upset when the stallion was stolen, and he was thrilled when the stallion that he loved returned. But he didn't stay there and attach too much meaning to any one of those things. Because he reserved judgment, he didn't experience the stress and drama of the events, where the neighbors felt the full force of all the events. So because of the mirror neurons, when we go negative, our brain spirals along this negative path that is contagious, bringing everything and everyone along with it before we know it. But if you believe in the sage perspective, you could bring empathy and curiosity about what's going on and move that challenge in a completely different direction. So you come across a lot of things on an average day, and how often do you judge the small things that you come across and attach meaning to them before you even have the opportunity to figure out what place they have in your life? So the question is, which perspective is true? Is it the best saboteur perspective that says this is bad, or the sage perspective that says this is a gift? We might not even have realized the gift yet, but we're going to leave the window open and say this is going to be a gift, an opportunity that we create. If you come from a religious or spiritual background, you probably say, "Yeah, I know this." But even if you don't, it comes down to whichever one you believe is true. If you believe the saboteur is true, that this is bad, it will be true for you. If you believe the sage perspective that this is a gift and opportunity, it will be true for you. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The third of the three core muscles is the self-command muscle. So we understand a little bit more about how we know we go negative and how our saboteurs work inside our head and what might be throwing us off balance. We know a little bit more about where we might go in the sage perspective in reserving judgment and not letting it strangle a process. But now, how do we make that leap? How do we go from left brain to right brain much more easily? And that's where the self-command muscle comes in, bridging that gap from left to right, from negative to positive. So here's the question. How often do you think that you're in control of your own mind? If you wouldn't wish stress, anger, guilt, shame on yourself, or to be woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning and be berated for past imperfections or future failures, then you're not in control of your own mind. Somebody else is running the show. So the self-command muscle is how we choose to shift our mindset from one area to the other, away from thoughts that don't serve us and into the area of the brain that does. And that's how building the self-command muscle really makes the difference here. But it is a sense of practice. It is practicing that shift. So if you went to the gym, you would likely start by lifting the weights that you can handle. And then you would do reps with those weights until you're able to pick up other weights, heavier weights, because you're getting stronger. And then you get stronger lifting those weights and doing reps until you get stronger and stronger. So there's research that shows the connection between these certain physiological repetitive actions and your state of mind, one of which we call a PQ rep. It helps to trigger the self-command muscles right underneath the forehead where your parasympathetic nervous system is activated. So one very simple exercise is if you were to rub your fingers together, 2 fingers together, and focus on the ridges of the fingers connecting with each other, and do that for 10 seconds. If we were to put you under an fMRI machine, we'd see the area of your brain where your saboteurs live quiet down, and we'd see the area of your brain where your sage lives start to light up. And that's big. So if you are somebody that does meditation or mindfulness training, this is bringing that into the moment where you're practicing some of these exercises with eyes open or eyes closed. So you're able to meet the moment and do these exercises when and where you really need them. In the middle of a meeting, when you're feeling stressed, you can do some of these exercises and help to make that switch from left to right, rebalancing, resetting, and continuing in a more positive direction, whereas otherwise, without it, you might go in another direction and then feel that negative energy and carry it with you for the rest of the day, informing all of your interactions and conversations. So using these simple exercises and practicing, making the shift to a clear-headed, laser-focused action, like our inner Jedi would want us to do, is how you build your self-command muscles. So you're commanding your mind to shift from saboteur to sage. Life is really messy, and don't you wish it came with an operating manual telling us exactly what and how to do, and how to do things well, the way we want them to be all the time? So this PQ, Positive Intelligence Operating System, is really simple. It's a template that we can use and build on. So the first step is when you are feeling like you are in the grip of negative emotions, just stop. You know you're in saboteur mode because they are responsible for and the creators of all of our negative emotions. Then you would do something like PQ reps to switch over to sage, to activate the sage muscle. And then you would shift your mind and remember that every situation, every outcome can be converted into a gift and opportunity. And the way we do that is by shifting into the sage powers, which would begin with empathy. Empathy for yourself, for being an imperfect human being. Empathy for the poor person that you might be judging at this moment. Empathy for the circumstances in play. And once you shift into empathy for either of those 3 things that are in judgment at the present time, that softens the ground for process. That softens the ground for conversation and creativity. And by softening that ground, as opposed to being hooked in the strangulation of the judge saying this is bad, That allows you then to move into curiosity. Well, let me see what's really going on here. What is in play? What are all the ramifications? Why have sales dipped? Or why is she doing that the way she's doing it when she knows I need it sooner? And then by really understanding what's happening through blameless discernment, not judgment, but blameless discernment, then we're able to get creative and innovative. We're able to figure out what are the possibilities here now that I better understand the situation. What are my choices and my options here? And how can I think outside the box and think about in 3 years' time, I want to say, look back and say, this is the best thing that ever happened to us. How can I come up with and generate new ideas? And then you would move into a navigation phase where you are holding up those innovative ideas up to your larger sense of purpose and values. And that's where you can take action. And that's how you would tell whether you are in saboteur mode, instituting or bringing in control mechanisms, or whether you're in sage mode and discovering that and feeling it in your body that this is the right approach. This is what we should be doing now. So you're moving from reactive to proactive. Besides the PQ reps, these 2 little finger things, there are many, many different exercises that you can do to make the switch. So another question is it really possible to just shift from the saboteur to the sage response, even in tough situations? Yes, but the speed and depth of the shift depends on the mental muscle strength. I do not consider myself at a black belt level of mental fitness. I'm thinking that maybe the Dalai Lama is. I'm not the Dalai Lama. Most of us are not, but we do what we can. And just opening ourselves up to these ideas and developing these 3 core muscles, the saboteur interceptor, the sage muscle, so you don't step out of one thing and into a void, but you have a belief system in play. And then developing the muscles to make that shift and practicing that in all the little moments and the big moments, that will put you on a path that spirals in a much more positive direction. So let's see this played out in something that we all know, like a relationship. So you remember when you meet someone and you fall in love and everything, it's a dance of the sage. Everything they do is wonderful and cute and quirky and yada, yada, yada. And it's this dance of the sage. And then once that fascination just sort of, you get used to each other and it starts to settle down a little bit. And then you hear this knock, knock, knock on the back of your head, closer to the left side. And it says, hey, okay, my turn. You know that cute and quirky thing they do? It's really kind of annoying, isn't it? Yeah, it's annoying. Who is it that you're with anyway? And then the judgment starts to creep in. And your judge triggers their judge. Your saboteurs trigger their saboteurs because that's what's happened. And so this wonderful positive vortex, once it's settled, starts to spin slowly in another direction. Sometimes, unfortunately, all the way to divorce court. But if in that moment you hear that knock, 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 and you feel that judgment, that little hook, that's the moment where you can stop, get curious, and you have to anticipate, you should anticipate, it would be wonderful to anticipate and think that the other person is at least 10% right. If you say that the other person is at least 10% right, that opens the door for creativity and questioning and conversation. Whereas the other direction, there's no good path out of that one. So then you ask, why is it that you do that? I've always done it this way. It's kind of quirky, but I just wonder. And then by opening the conversation to something that you might not have been aware of before, by just coming with the mindset that they are at least 10% right, you have converted something that could have been very negative into a deeper understanding in the relationship. And that would be true for a personal relationship or anything that might be in play at work with colleagues. Anywhere you spend time with people in conflict management, that's a basic template. So all of this is to say that we are not focused in developing mental fitness on doing anything perfectly, but we're focused on how to take the mistake, the imperfection, the judgment, and emerge from it faster and easier so that we can create our way out of this situation, learning something along the way. So I'll tell you something. This program has had a profound impact on me. The other day, I felt like I really got my butt kicked, and it wasn't anybody's problem. In the past, I would have been absolutely devastated by that experience, but instead I was able to shrug it off, which meant that who I interacted with, how I proceeded, my frame of mind, and the decisions that I made from that point, I was able to do in a much healthier way in my sage perspective, because I took that and I figured out what I could learn from it. I reset from it almost immediately, and I was able to go into something in an area that was much more productive and positive. The systemic implications of that on everybody and your ecosystem is really what is really going to benefit from all of this. So what I just gave you is like a brochure on how to sail a boat. The reason why learning and development programs or conferences don't have lasting results is because behavioral change and takes place after the training and is done by a certain amount of regular and intense practice over time. So insight is only 20%. But the other portion of real behavioral change is about developing 80% mental muscle. So when we invoke our sage, it leads to thoughts and behaviors that better serve ourselves, our clients, our colleagues. And again, there's the systemic implications that are in place. So I hope that you have some new ideas to work with, some new tools to work with, and that you can walk away with this being able to do something even today. So thank you for your time, but this is where I'll have to leave you with a 20% insight. We're going to go into Q&A and open up the floor to questions and answers, after which Ludwine's going to close out the program. And if you like, I'll hang around after the recording has stopped to talk to you about what the mental fitness program looks like, because it takes about 15, 20 minutes a day for 6 to 8 weeks. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Cara. It was a very interesting, powerful, and inspiring presentation. Very dense, a lot of information. And who wants to open the floor? Who has a question for Cara?
Well, I have a question. Thanks, Cara, for this presentation. I'm a very beginner in this kind of let's say self-awareness about the I don't know how we say that even in English, but the kind of self-awareness about behavior and so on. I feel that very interesting. I've been reading a lot about Enneagram. I don't know if you have heard about this kind of system, and it really gives the personality of somebody. And here, I don't feel like, but I might be wrong, how can you identify which personality you are, and hence, what are the solutions that you can put in place to balance your negative emotions?
Yeah, so I'm not very familiar, at least I'm not deeply familiar with Enneagram. I mean, I'm familiar with Myers-Briggs and some of the other strengths assessments. And I would say it's a matter of yes and. So I put up on the screen before, you can go to positiveintelligence.com/saboteurs and take an assessment, which will give you an indication. And when people take these strengths assessments, then they start to see the overlap. And it's a matter of yes and. So it's wonderful to be to understand your strengths and understand your the weaknesses that are associated with it. But it's a matter of what can you learn from all of them, and then how do you notice when you have crossed the line from your strength into your weakness, and how can you bring yourself back behind that line so that you're proceeding from your strength. Does that make sense? So it's not a matter of either or. I think it's all of it to find your way into something that works for you and makes sense to you.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Who wants to go next? Once again, don't be shy.
Our question about in the business life of the team dynamic, would you encourage us to be open about, let's see, identifying when a judgment happens and having that type of transparent conversation with one another as a team grows in their trust and effectiveness?
This is where it's really beneficial for teams to go through the program together so that they can have those open conversations. And when they are, and even families, quite frankly, I mean, families have been saved. I haven't worked with families, but I can't tell you how much feedback I've heard about people saying this saved my marriage. But if you can develop a common language and understand something about each other and have a space to share those insights, then yeah, you can say, you know what, I'm feeling something right now. I need to just process it a little bit, and can you help me to understand what's happening? And depending upon the level of trust that you have with other colleagues, you know, it's Lorianne, you can come to me and say, okay, who's talking right now? Is that your sage or is that your hyperachiever? You know, are you in judge mode or are you in sage mode? And then it allows people to really pause and reset and maybe have a much more productive conversation on the other side. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that super helps. I'm wondering if simple questions like, you know, tell me more or help me understand.
Absolutely.
Does that open up the interaction?
Yeah, so that's right. So that's first there's the notice, and then there's the move into empathy, right? Before you start saying, oh, that was a stupid idea, or what did she do that for? It's empathizing with them because you're the one that's judging them. And then you can go into the creative process of and the exploration process of, so tell me about this. Help me to understand what's going on here. Because then it assumes that you don't know everything, but that there's something for you to learn and understand here that you wouldn't have known about otherwise. And they might be keeping from you for a reason. Maybe it's something personal, but you would probably want to know otherwise. So it's intercept and stop, empathize, and that opens the door for exploration. Make sense?
Thank you. Very helpful.
Welcome.
Yes, and empathy is one of the top soft skills that is going to be sought after for young professionals. So I think it's extremely interesting.
And it's something, as a recovering hyper-rational, that the rational mind really needs to practice when it comes to conflict management, because that's a tough one for rational thinkers.
Okay, we still have time for one question, otherwise we are going to wrap it up.
I'll jump in and ask a question.
Sure.
So I've done a lot of the self-help, and I love all of these conversations and all of these topics. And so one of the things that I know that I'm coming face to face with daily is when we have slower moments like this, where we can slow it down and we can talk about it and we can kind of dissect it and really understand. But then when you're actually in the moment, say like in a business meeting or you're in a one-on-one and those moments come up and I can feel myself, I mean, even now as I'm talking, I'm like, rub the fingers, where, you know, afterwards, where you can slow it down and kind of debrief and understand it more in depth. But when you're actually in those high stakes moments where it comes up and you can't really stop a conversation and dive into it, have you had experiences, or, I mean, I'm going to assume, where when you're actually in those moments and you can feel the judgment come in, or you can feel, the pleaser or the hyper rational, and know you're in it, but you need to stay in that moment, in the meeting or in that conversation, things that kind of help you navigate that, so you are doing that a little bit better.
Right. So we want to lift the weights that we can handle and think of this as more of a marathon than a sprint. So whatever you can do to make things better for yourself and calm yourself, then maybe it's something that you want to bring up later after you have unpacked what you're feeling, and then you can step into a more calm, clear-headed conversation that you would do in follow-up. Does that make sense? Until you're better able to navigate. And maybe if you do have a strong pleaser and you know that, give your pleaser the opportunity to grow until you get a little more used to letting your sage step forward and can speak your truth more confidently. And if it means, just unpacking and then having a conversation afterwards, from your sage perspective, isn't that a win?
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Katie, for your questions. Thank you, Cara, for a very, very inspiring conversation. I would just like to make a few announcements about our upcoming programs. FACNI will soon go back to in-person programs. So we'll have a Café des Sciences, which is an event in French on March 3rd at the Residence of France. And we also plan as a celebration of International Women's Day on March 8th in partnership with the German American Business Council in person downtown Boston.
Let me show that. Let me see if I can switch that over to the next. To the next.
Oh, thank you, Cara. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I was in control.
But that's okay. And next week, we are part of the organization of the 28th Annual International Business Forum of the Global Business Alliance of New England, which is an organization that gathers most of the international business associations and American associations in Boston. The topic this year is about climate change, with top speakers from Tufts University, UMass Amherst, and a few international companies, including FACNI's Platinum members, Natixis, investment managers, and Veolia North America. So we invite you to join this program next week. It's featured on our website, and you can also find it on LinkedIn. And I hope to see you soon. You can find more information about our programs and membership on our website. For those of you who would like to know more about the programs, the coaching programs proposed by Cara, we can stay a few more minutes. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.